you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here. And when I came for the honorary doctorate, I was, of course, very honored, but very sad that I could stay for only a very brief time. I'm so glad to be here back, able to spend more time with you. So, oops, my computer had fallen asleep. So, Mathemalchemy. Let me first start with a little teaser. So, well, I seem to not have it here. So let me go straight into the talk. The Mathemalchemy is an exhibit, a mathematical wonderland, as it says here. And this talk really is about the gestation and the birth of Mathemalchemy, and I'll tell you also a little bit about Mathemalchemy. And you can find a lot of stuff about the exhibit at the website that's on the board. Please go there after the talk, not during. And often I give this talk together with Dominique Irman, who was the artistic director, but I'm here to present her in spirit as well. So Mathemalchemy is this room full. It's about 3 meters long. No, actually longer than that. 20 feet, 6 meters, 6.5 meters long, about 3 meters wide, about 3 meters high. So it's a room full of, it's an exhibit, it's a world, it has many things. It's supposed to be attractive to children, to students, to seasoned mathematicians, to researchers. And it evokes a world, a magical world, where critters live and have customs and objects that are mathematically interesting and relevant. And one can explore it for a few minutes, or people spend days, actually. So every story has many beginnings, and so Dominique and I came to this in different ways. So I'm a mathematician. I like working on interdisciplinary collaborations, and I have long been fascinated with mathematical art. In fact, year at the joint math meetings of the American Math Societies, there's a corner of the exhibit space where it shows mathematical objects, and they're beautiful, they're delightful, they're wonderfully made. These people are really wonderful craftspeople and artists. And here are a few examples of objects that were at a recent exhibit. And in fact, these are 3 objects that are in some sense related to Mathemalchemy. So these objects are beautiful, delightful to mathematicians. They have lots of symmetries, they illustrate things, but they're small. And I had this fantasy, wouldn't it be wonderful to see a whole installation, a story being told, or many stories being told, using objects like these. And in the summer of 19, I actually visited an exhibit where I saw this piece. It's called Time to Break Free. And I thought it was astounding. First of all, it was beautifully made, but it tells a story also. So it's made by a textile artist, and you see a quilt here, and it was attached with a chain. It's breaking free, and it's being aspired by this steampunk machine that is transforming it, and out step the characters that you saw as appliqué on the quilt, and they step out as 3D characters, confident, greeting the world, impatient for adventures. And I thought, wow, this is a static installation, but it tells a story. And it, of course, has beautiful textile art in it. So I actually did what I have never done since, or I'd never done before. I just looked up the name of the artist. I found her on the internet. I contacted her on Facebook. I sent her a message over Messenger. I have a Facebook account only because I want to be in touch with my children who post things on Facebook. I mean, I don't use it really. So, but here I did, and incredibly, she answered. I mean, she also has never done that before or after, answer people that she doesn't know. She uses Facebook to stay in touch with people who come to the workshops that she teaches about textile art, and she post them about projects, and then they respond to that. And so, but to somebody she had never known. And actually, I later heard that she said, "What is this?" And she asked her husband. He says, "Well, look her up." And then she said, "It's a real person." And so we after that we got in touch, and we started working together. So Dominique's story is that she actually, after a whole career as a chocolatier, in which she made beautiful pieces for weddings and so on, and she makes fantastic chocolate. I've asked a chocolate lesson from her, and I will make that for her. She discovered quilting because when the children were grown up, her husband asked her, could they, he's an avid fisherman, could they plan on an annual vacation where they would take off from their work. In the summer, she couldn't work on chocolate anyway because it's too hot. And they would go and go to the western United States and Canada, and he would fish in. And she says, yes, but I don't fish. So please make me a contraption that I can use my sewing machine with a solar panel. And so that's what she did. She would sew. They would go hike too, but she would sew. And she discovered fiber art at this little gallery in Montana. And she discovered that people were making quilts that were not just bedspreads, that were telling stories. And so she became enthusiastic, and she started making more intricate things. And from the beginning, she was very meticulous. She makes beautiful work, but she pushed a little bit at the boundary. So one of the first pieces for which she got an award was one where the skirt of this lady is already ballooning out. So she was exploring other dimensions. She explored not regular borders. She did one for super quilter, inspired by pop-up books, and she made this piece. This was her maquette for the piece, but it became that piece, which was called Come Follow Me, which is three-dimensional. It has these different layers, and that piece was a piece for which she had entered because many quilt expositions are linked to a contest. So they try to give prizes to people who have the best quilts, to entice them to bring very high quality quilts for exhibition. And she had followed meticulously all the rules, but the jury decided to dismiss her, to put her outside the contest, because they said, well, it's not a quilt. I mean, I said, but I am within your limits of. I said, yeah, but it's a freestanding thing. I said, well, you didn't say it would be a freestanding thing. I mean, anyway, so at that exhibition, she got overwhelmingly the grand prize of the public, and she was disqualified by the jury. So she said, the heck with it. And that's what created Time to Break Free. She says, time to break free from these constraints, from these rules. And so she made an enormous in their living room. They lived for more than a year with this maquette in their living room, because she believes in order to try out things, in trying things. So she posted, this is from many things that she posted on Facebook, and that came. So I call her and I say, look, would you be interested in working on an installation with mathematical artists? And I convinced her that there were people who made fantastically beautiful things. Daina Taimina, who was the instigator of all the hyperbolic crochet that you see in the crochet coral reef, and Carolyn Yackel, who taught me how to make tamari balls, and I'll talk more about those and demo them, and Susan Goldstein, who makes beautiful things in crochet and knitting beading. And I said, look, there are these people that make quality work, I mean, of the quality that you would not be ashamed to be associated with. And would you be willing to help us put an installation together? Because you have that talent too. And she says, well, I have to warn you, mathematics was not my favorite topic at school. And I said, well, I'm so sorry, you didn't have great teachers. And I sent her lots of books about mathematics and about visualizing mathematics and about mathematical art. And I later learned that she spent, during the next 2 months, she spent 2 hours every day reading these books. And she digested them, lots of little drawings, things start taking shape. We would talk every week. Actually, since that time, we have talked almost every week for an hour at least. So since 19, and sometimes there's a week where, well, when she goes fishing in the Tetons, I can't contact her as easily. But she was game for it, and she immediately, from the start, she thought there should be some silhouettes representing people on the installation, viewing the thing. So the little girl and the teenager, this was her view of an adult mathematician, and I mean, very stiff we talked about many things. I mean, people who know about it will recognize a construction of the Kakeya conjectures. And she would put in all these different things. She knew about Fibonacci, so the early thing had many spiraling Fibonacci constructions. And she made a little maquette that incorporated many of the ideas we had. It fit into in separate pieces, which she had to mount together in a small suitcase. And we went to the joint meetings in Denver in 2020. Actually, in the airport was the first time we met in person. I mean, so we met up, and then we went to the hotel, and she started opening her suitcase and putting this magical maquette together. There was, at the joint meetings in Denver, as always, there are many little parallel conferences, and there was one on math and art. And at that session, we presented together, and we said, look, this is a call to you all. I mean, we have this concept, but we guarantee you that when we start designing, we can design from scratch again. Everything is open. You will have full say, the group that the design in what we do and so on. It will be very collaborative. And we come with something concrete so that you know what we're talking about, but we can scratch everything over here. And I talked about this vision, Dominique talked about how to make it. And I said, look, in a couple of days, near the end of the meeting, I'll hold a little party. And I had rented an extra hotel room for this party. And came, and we talked about it. And here you see, I mean, I was so happy. I mean, so I have this is Carolyn Yackel, one of the 3 people of which I showed work to Dominique, saying, look, this is Susan Goldstein. Another one of my stars. So they came, and they signed up. So after that meeting, we had these people who had signed up. But then they said, so-and-so, who I know, would have expertise that complements what we have already, and was not at the joint meetings, so they could not come. But they would really like, can we contact them? And I said, sure. And so we became this group of 24. So these are the 24 mathemalchemists, and now it's kind of noticeable that these 24 people comprise 20 women and 4 men. This was not my goal. This was not the intention. And actually, George Hart, who is the president of the Bridges Math and Art Association that organizes annual conferences on math and art, asked me, he says, how did you do this? Because he says, I know this community very well, he says, and it's true there are more women in it than in math in general in the US, but more than 50% men. I said, George, I don't know. I presentation, and I asked people to come forward and to say that they wanted to collaborate, to cooperate, this collaborative venue, said, and these are the people that came. I mean, I believe that actually the fact that it was meant to be a very collaborative thing, where no one would own the whole concept, may have played a role. But that's my bias. I leave to George Hart his bias. I'm sorry, I'm teasing here. Please, if you're close friends to George, I like him a lot. He's a wonderful man. So I promised that if we had a group, then I would find funding, and we did find funding. And we had workshops planned. A first workshop where we would all get together and hammer out the stories and the concept and everything, and then we would start working on it. And we would get together and bring our small items to integrate in bigger things at further work. Well, but it was 2020. And the first workshop was planned for the 3rd week of March. So it didn't happen. So even though we had hotels booked, we had rooms booked, we had everything arranged and all the airline tickets bought, it didn't happen because everything shut down. So, but we decided, unlike many conferences that were postponed or canceled, to just do it anyway. We decided this is where I learned to Zoom, because until then I was Skyping. I mean, this is where I learned to Zoom, so I learned to Zoom, I learned breakout rooms and so on in a crash course. And we held our conference on Zoom, a 2-day workshop on Zoom, I mean, where we talked about the whole thing, we hammered out, we discussed, we then had breakout rooms about little components, we came together again. And this actually was the way in which we operated for the full design and the later fabrication of, so we met weekly with the full group to hammer out concepts, and subgroups that worked on small subsets of the scene, of the whole installation, met during the week and reported back to the whole group. And we became a community. We talked to each other, we demoed, you see here still the silhouettes, and the maquette has become a little bigger, but a plan was made. It became I like to think of it as peninsula, think of it as an island. It doesn't matter. I mean, so Mathmalchemy World was created, and through all these discussions, Dominique learned that mathematicians were much more fun and creative and than she realized. And so this stiff person who was scratching like that became that flowing, spontaneous. So I teased her about that, and she said, yeah, my view has changed completely. So we were sometimes skeptical, sometimes we laughed. We laughed a lot because there were lots of puns and so on. My husband says, I can always tell you when you have a mathematical meeting over Zoom rather than any of the other meetings that we were all having over Zoom. He says, because you laugh so much more. Then after 3 months of that, Dominique said, stop. Now we're going to have a hiatus of 2 weeks, and I'm going to build this 1/4 scale maquette of the whole installation, because I want to see how it all integrates, how it works together. And somebody said, can't we do that virtually? She says, no, she says, I'm a physical person. I need to do this. And this maquette still exists. Actually, it's now on exhibit at Duke University, and with an explanation of it, and people admire it. And so it has many of the components that you will see, that we will visit. And then we had to fabricate. So we started fabricating in September of 2020, all isolated in our different places, and we had to build things on which we were expert. And I was not an expert in anything, so for a long time I just functioned as some kind of glue, I mean, in between. Because, for instance, Dominique made the sketches of the silhouettes, but she made those sketches on paper. The person who was going to realize them was going to use a CNC cutter in plywood in order to make them. Okay, for that he needed a vectorized file. So I made a transition from the drawing to the vectorized to the PDF file that he could then use on the cutter. And then we realized that some of the things here, that there were some things that were too very narrow, and so we needed a very precise router. But if we routed the whole thing together, then it would take many more time than he could borrow the router. So we had to do it in different, so we had to do the file in a multi-resolution way. I mean, so I did all that. I did that glue. And fabricating. Now, fabricating, the final result is something that's harmonious with many colors, but they work together. That's not easy to do if you work in a number of different states. So Dominique said, okay, I'll first give you a lecture on color. She says, that's how I start my workshop with artists and so on. And we sat there and we didn't understand a thing. And she says, okay, this isn't working. So she then had the idea of going to Home Depot and look at paint samples and looking at the codes of the colors she wanted, and she would send us those codes. And we went to Home Depot And it didn't work because she lives in Canada and we live in the States, and the codes are different. So she went back to Home Depot and she explained, she said, could she actually borrow for each of the colors she wanted, could she borrow that? Could she get the whole strip and could she get 5 of them? And she cut each of the 5 into pieces and then distributed them to everybody. And so we all had samples of the colors. And so then later, when we had to discuss colors, because we couldn't discuss colors just on Zoom, because you can't, the settings of everybody's terminal may be different, you can't trust colors on screens. So what we then did was we would show the colors of the components that we used together with the color that she had picked to show that they were the same. And that's how the whole color harmony, but so it needed thinking about that. I would never have thought of that, but she, because she was this more physical, practical person, did. So, and then we would demo to each other. Here you see Carolyn Jackel demonstrate a tamari ball, and here you see me demonstrating some embroidery I was doing. And so there were so many different materials and techniques, and there's so many content also in Mathmalchemy. So I'm going to very, very quickly show you objects, examples of all the different techniques we used. And for each of those, it will show you the people who worked on those objects. And often there will be several people, because we would send things, some person would start on it and then send it by mail. We subsidized the US Postal Services a lot, and they were slow. So here we go. There's 3D printing, there's beading, there's ceramics, there's crochet, there's cross-stitching, there's knitting, laser cutting, metal welding, needle felting, origami, painting, polymer clay, quilting, sewing, stained glass, tamari balls, weaving. There's wire bending and woodworking in many places. And finally, light. So all these things come in. And so it's a mix of many, many different craft techniques and used artistically. But there are also many, many layers to the installation. Stories and math concepts and jokes. And so let me demonstrate to you how you can, so if you go to the website after the talk is over, you see a view of the venue where it is now. The earlier pictures were at an earlier venue at Boston University, in fact. This one is now at the Museum of Mathematics in New York City. It is until the 27th of October. At that date, it will, in the evening of that date, we'll start packing it up, and it will travel to Montreal, where it will be from November 6th, will be exposed from November 6th till early May next year. And then there it will be packed up, and then it will travel up to the Navajo Nation, Museum of the Navajo Nation in Window Rock, Arizona. So it typically stays 6 months in one place because it takes 5 days to set it up and 4 days to set it apart. It doesn't make sense for it to go somewhere for 1 week. It will be in Philadelphia at the time of the ICM. It will not be at the ICM itself because the ICM exhibition space is only for ICM for 2 weeks, and it can't be set up for 2 weeks. It will be at either Drexel or at the University of Pennsylvania, UPenn, which is a short subway ride away, and it can be viewed there. But so on this website, you can explore, you can find many, many things. First of all, you can go down and see videos about it, and so on. But if you just go to menu and you explore, then you come to where you can find explore Mathmalchemy. And each scene in Mathmalchemy has an interesting story. What's happening? What is Arnold the cat really doing? And he's talking with Mose the mouse. And what is Tess the tortoise doing? And so on. So the story from Through the Looking Glass, we call that. They also have many mathematical connections that you can explore separately. And if you're so minded, you can explore fabrication. So if we go to stories, then this is, each one of these scenes has an icon, and you can then click on that and explore them. So for instance, if we go to bakery, then you see that through the mathematical looking glass, you get a possible video here. And let's look at that video. Let's look at it. Let's look at the YouTube version. It's the same video. And so several of the scenes like that, of the stories, are illustrated through with videos. Not all of them, but for every one of them, there's a through the looking glass story that tells you what this means in the life of mathematical world. So back to the presentation. So there was an article that appeared in the AMS notices about mathmalchemy, which was a very tongue-in-cheek article because it was a discussion, a conversation between Arnold, the cat, who's the baker, and Harriet, the bowerbird, who holds the curio shop, who's the owner of the curio shop. It's called Conway's Curios, as a tribute to John Conway, who we lost during the pandemic from COVID. And his offices looked very much like the curio shop, full of exciting mathematical objects. And they walk, and Harriet says, so Arnold is telling her that she has really an eye for art, and she says, no. She says, art is so difficult. I don't know. I just do math. Math is, so she reverts the standard. She inverses the standard perception of art is something that not everybody can become a professional artist, but art is something that everybody has a feel for, while math is this horrible. So she inverses that. And they take a tour of the island, and in fact on this map you see their paw prints following, and it describes their tour. And let's a few of the scenes. So this map shows all the where the critters live, and this magical world with many objects and many customs that evoke mathematics. Oops, oh shoot, what did I do? Okay, and we call that the through the looking glass. So I've shown you this, and we've seen another one is where you can see mathmalchemy the tortoise. The tortoise is, well, I didn't show the video for tortoise because it's, sorry. Oops. Trying to go back. In the test video, you see her, well, maybe we can see a little bit of it. I have it lined up here as well. We won't see it in full because it's too long, and I want to tell you much more. But so,
the stainless steel lighthouse was designed by physicist Subeto Matsumoto, and it will sit at
this
one
is not
end
what I
of the
wanted to show.
As a functioning real lighthouse would, the dodecahedron beacon will have Fresnel lenses to focus the light.
This is not the one I wanted to show
shown
you.
here on our work.
But this is an example of another video you can find. So that's the tortoise. So this was a video that was made by, and somehow it seems to have gone, it went to a different one. This is the bakery. So I was still on bakery, but okay, now I see what happened. So let's go to Tess and see a little bit of Tess. Okay, and we'll just see a little bit here. So Tess is you see, Tess is standing on a path. She walks this path every day. She meditates. And she has a to-do list. And because one does, I mean, if one is a well-organized tortoise, then one has a to-do list. And the pavers just shrink in area, and that's why the same number of pavers makes the path. So Arnold in the bakery, if you look closely, and I think we can see this on the next slide, as the video said, you see that the shapes tessellate. They are designed in such a way that they, and actually people then ask me, can we get this cookie cutter? And now you can, I'll tell you later. On the wall of the bakery, there's a wallpaper. And like many things, it illustrates something in mathematics. And what would a wallpaper illustrate except the wallpaper groups? So if you take a little figure and you want some geometric operations to generate a motif that then you translate by two vectors to make a wallpaper, there are 17 different ways you can do this. You can just repeat it like at the top, and there are other 8 ways that are shown here, and that use reflections and so on to generate the motif that then is used to tessellate a plane periodically. There are only 9 shown, and I told you there were 17. And that's because this is knitted. First of all, it was a labor of love to knit this. I mean, it's huge, it's about this big, and it's double knitted, so it means the other side is exactly the reverse, it's not in jacquard. And it's very thin wool because it wanted to illustrate that you could not only have left-right symmetry, which is obvious with knitting stitches do that, but also up and down. And in knitting thread, really, one thread follows this pattern. And if the thread is long and thin enough, then you could say, well, that's like a horizontal, a reflection with respect to a horizontal line. So these are all the patterns that have only glide translations and horizontal and vertical mirrorings. There are other in the wallpaper groups that have, here you have these mice again repeated with 90-degree rotations. In fact, the 3 groups that use 90-degree rotations are realized in cross-stitching, because that is something that has 90-degree symmetry. And then there are 5 more. We have 9 plus 3 is 12. We have 5 missing. Those 5 are illustrated on the wall hanging that you see in the curio shop. In the wall hanging is done with little pieces of fabric that are oriented around. And so those 5 are illustrated. So this is one of the things that we did in Mathmalchemy. We tried to take mathematical concepts and illustrate fully all the wallpaper groups, but then in a way that also married it nicely with the crafting, with the artistic technique that was used in order to make them. So there is this link between the physicality and its symmetries and the object. Mathematical connections. This, in Mathmalchemy, this bay, we had to have this bay because part of our funding came from the Leverhulme Trust, and that was contributed by a grant that Dorothy Buck had with the Leverhulme Trust. She had just joined Duke, and she brought her grant with her, and that grant had some money for outreach through art. And she said, we can use that money for Mathmalchemy, I'd love to. She says, but it has to have then some of my research in it, some of the things I work on it, because it's my grant. And she works on knot theory. So no problem, we'll have a nautical scene. So, and so that's why we have the bay. And it's indeed full of knots. I mean, the fish that get fished are knots. And in fact, she was working on a theta diagrams, theta graphs that can be covered by knots, and so on. And so those are illustrated there. And so I told you we laughed a lot. Around the corner in the playground, the chipmunks. I mean, we have, the chipmunks are discovering numbers. They are very little kids. They are here, they have a day off from school, and we'll get back to why they have a day off. And they have been given an assignment that they have to look at numbers and see whether they're composite or prime. They don't know tables of multiplication yet. What they have been told to do is to take the number, and the number is on the tiles that they hold. Oops, sorry. This is the number 12. It's in Babylonian cuneiform, and this is in 13, because we wanted to link to many different cultures. And we actually have also Mayan numbers illustrated somewhere. I'm not showing them, but we have them. They had to then take a smaller number and see if they laid out exactly as many acorns as their tile set in shorter rows, whether it would end up evenly or not. And so the kid with 12 found that with rows of 4, it ends up evenly, beautiful. And with 2 and with 6, and with 5, no, with 5 there is a remainder. And in fact, you see here, this is the 5 display, and there's 1 and 2 that are the remainders, and they put, around the remainders, they put little friendship bracelets that they had fashioned themselves earlier. And the kid with 13, of course, finds that he always has a remainder. And so they're both very happy. I mean, they both have a very special number. I mean, in the beginning, the original scene was, because in stories about number theory, primes always have the starring role. And I felt we should do something opposite. I felt we should do that the kid with 12 would say, oh, look, I have so many things that it works out, and 30s, and I don't. Then the other said, but we don't want kids to be unhappy because they discover something mathematical. So they're both happy. Both numbers are very special. And they were right, of course. And around the corner in the park, and this is why the chipmunks have the day off, because this is a very special day in the year of Mathmalchemy where the squirrels have their annual picnic. And they have a ritual during their picnic. They sieve the primes. That's to say, they have this big screen from 1 to 100, and then sieves get put up that veil, put a colored veil over some of the numbers. And the veil for 2 leaves 2 open, but then veils all the multiples of 2. And the veil for 3 has come and has done all the multiples of 3. And so 6 has been covered twice already. Then 5 has been done. 7 is just arriving. You see that the veil for 7 has a veil in front of 21 and here of 42. And you see a little bit of the veil of 63. The multiples of 7 will be veiled. And then there's another thing that is arriving, another screen that's arriving with the multiples of 11 veiled. And what's happening here is that Tassos, the librarian, is explaining to the designated listener, because he does this every year, and they know they can't stop him, but they have heard it before. He says, shouldn't have this screen for 11, because we only have the numbers from 1 to 100, and all the things that the screen for 11 will veil will already have been veiled by other screens, because it's only 11 squared that is a new one, and that's beyond 100. And they know he's going to do this, and so they draw lots on who will have to listen to him while he squirrel-splains this to them. And but on the here we have another sieving. I mean, not on the brown ones. Another on the one that have white markers on them. Another sieving of the primes explained. This is in the Gaussian integers. In the field of the Gaussian integers, you see in the Gaussian integers, you see first of all the units. 0 is here. This is 1 I minus 1 minus I. Those are hors du concours. Then here you take away the multiples of 1 plus I or 1 minus I, which are the same. Then you go to the next larger one in absolute value. So you'd start taking away the multiples of 1 plus 2I or 2 plus I mean in 2 steps. And the same thing happens actually with the horizon given by this, the size of the pavers, that the next one, the multiple of 3, already do not remove within the paver more. That's why she put the brown pavers in between, otherwise we would have had too many identical pavers. We also, these are really made by little tiles that were remnants of a bathroom renovation of one mathematical alchemist, and she didn't have any more whites anyway. But so all these things played a role. And the silhouettes live in a different layer. Dominique from the start had these human figures in there, and she said, with all these critters, she says, some of the viewers will identify more easily with a human figure. I said, I don't know. She says, well, Ingrid, I know you can identify with a chipmunk, but some people cannot. And she's right, you can perfectly identify with chipmunk. And so the silhouettes live around it. We live in the middle, whether they can be perceived. Actually, the story that is later told, we believe that some of them can perceive them through the mathmalchemy story. You could imagine that they are people imagining this world. There might be deities in this world. It's as the viewer wants to interpret them, but they stand around there. And we have 3 of them, little girl, teenager, and the adult mathematician, and they're experiencing mathematical stages in life. The little girl is blowing a trumpet, and she has a muted trumpet, and so the air that comes out has Kalman vortices in it. And the teenager has built herself a rocket board, and she's surfing on the waves, which you can't really do in reality, but anyway. And the mathematician, she's standing there, and swirling around are lots of ideas she might have in her head. Some are history of mathematics, some are beautiful proofs, some are just interesting drawings, some are very profound facts, some mean. And the little girl is sitting on this pile of books about which we had, to which I will come back. The little girl actually made a completely new development in mathmalchemy, which we hadn't expected. At the second venue where the exhibition was shown, the head of the biology department is also a comic science book writer, and explains typically biology, but his son has just started graduate school in mathematics and has been explaining math to his dad forever. And so his dad you should make a drawing, or maybe a comic strip of 4 panels, and so on. And in the end, it became a whole comic book. And we have that, you can find that on the Mathmalchemy page. If you go to the menu, here, let's go back to menu, you can see here comic book. And if you go there, this is where you get. And they imagined a story in which the little girl, it's a parallel world in which a little girl, through some magic, lands in Mathmalchemy, and it talks down about her adventures. So they give a backstory to elements that we had left vague in our exhibition. And we were absolutely delighted. It's wonderful. And then volunteers stepped up to translate it. I mean, so we have now all these, and in fact, I also have a German and Portuguese, but I haven't put them into the blank set. And so you can download a Spanish version and start reading it. I mean, and so it tells you the story of, and so we hope that kids can, we've had to translate the title. I mean, in the beginning we didn't want to, but the Italians said, absolutely not. We will not take, and so after that everybody wanted it translated. So we did it for Spanish as well. And so it tells the story about here in this country where you have a mom and her daughter sitting, and the mom is a mathematician, and she wants to make a connection. And then suddenly the little girl lands, it's called after Emmy Noether, lands in and so on. So that got a life of its own, something that we had not expected at all, and which we thought was absolutely wonderful. So, and this is the English page for which I showed you the Spanish page, and you can find it there. And it exists only virtually. We are intending to make a printed version with more notes, but for the moment it exists. But you can print it out from the PDF. And the silhouettes have a structural role too, and I'm going slow, so I'm going to talk you a little bit about it only, in that they contain steel structures that help keeping the whole thing up. So for that we needed this of Dominique and her husband. And here all these swirling pages are held up by steel structures inside the silhouette. And the quilt itself, which we'll talk a little bit about, is inside has other steel, very strong bars, and this netting over which it has been sewn. The quilt is a cryptography. It has many, it shows ways in which information can be coded. It actually shows how you make a 4/7 Hamming code word and how you decode a corrupted one. But it also illustrates knapsack codes, it has the Enigma machine and so on. So there are little hidden messages kids can decipher, and or adults, it doesn't have to be only kids. On the other side of the quilt, we have the grey doodle page. Because we were unexpectedly so many women mathematicians, we decided to celebrate women on the doodle. And we wanted to put Maria Mirzakhani. First we thought the whole quilt would celebrate Maria Mirzakhani, but then we realized she wouldn't have liked to be singled out like that. She was a great mathematician, but she also was modest. And so we decided we would take mathematicians, and again, like everywhere in Mathmalchemy, we were not systematic. Some of them are amateur mathematicians, like Alicia Boulstad. Some of them are of previous centuries, Ada Lovelace. Sonia Kovalevskaya, in the books that are in the Tachlefler Institute, it's shown that when she made mistakes, she would scratch them out and she would embellish that with little flowers and so on. So we took these playful things that they had. Even the things from Maria Mirzakhani, we copied from those large sheets that she showed where she wrote remarks to herself. I mean, and you're done if you're lucky. I mean, and so here you see all these different sketches. This one is from Gladys West, who is like a like the women in Hidden Figures, an African-American woman who could not find an academic job when she got her PhD. She worked for the Navy, and she actually worked on the precise models that would be gotten from the satellite for the Earth. Those are still the models that are used in GPS locators these days. So her math lives on. So this is the maquette. In the maquette, you can see that at the other side of Mathmalchemy, we had all this stuff happening here. We needed a counterpart, a tall counterpart, and that's the lighthouse. When the first idea of the lighthouse, Dominique says, we're not going to do that. I mean, that looks like a mini golf. I mean, give me something more structural, and so a structure was designed. It's a very interesting structure. It was done in steel welding. It's done in such a way that the curve along which the two planes join, there is no torsion component in that curve along that join. And so the result, I mean, you can't have me here too long, I'll destroy the whole thing. The result is that it was very, very easy to weld. Steel plates don't mind bending. They hate being torsaded. If you have torsion in them, then you have to really have very strong welds. This, when it was welded, actually, it turned out the person who welded them said, it was a graduate student, he says, I've never welded anything this easy. It just goes where I want it to go. I don't have to force it. I put a clamp in, but just for fun. And it has a consequence. These are now being explored for using in developing countries to make very strong models for beams, for molds to make concrete things. Because if you don't have to be an expert welder and you don't have to weld things like that, then it's much easier to have these very strong constructions. So there are side effects to all this. On top of the lighthouse, we have a stained glass dodecahedron, and this illustrates some recent math. Actually, among Platonic solids, the dodecahedron is the only one where you can go from one vertex round the dodecahedron and come back on a straight path, on a geodesic, which becomes straight on this net, and not hit another vertex. You can classify all the things that do that, I mean, once or twice or so on, and count them. And this is there's a field of geometry that likes doing things like that. And that was done only recently, and actually within the last 10 years. And so when I found that paper, the stained glass artist says, oh, I want to illustrate that. And she made the stained glass this way. It's actually a photograph of the stained glass as she laid it out. And that's illustrated. And actually 2 of the 3 authors came to visit Mathmalchemy in New York, and that was real fun. On top of the conformal projection, we have a sphere and a light at the bottom at the South Pole, and then a plane that's parallel to the tangent plane at the North Pole. And so it projects without distorting angles anything that was carved, well, really 3D printed on the sphere. So that's the light. Okay, many, many layers in connection with mathematics. The books illustrate so many things. They illustrate roots of mathematics, the elements of Euclid, but also the 9 chapters of Chinese mathematics, Al-Khwarizmi's book, sutras. I mean, for the sutras, in order to make sure that I had the right names and I was quoting the right thing, I wrote to Manjul Bhargava, and he wrote to a historian of mathematics that he knew, who sent us back a whole treatise on in order to work our things right. And you can find, I think I've put it on the internet, I'm not sure. But we also have books like, I mean, The Beauty of Geometry by Coxeter. How could we miss that book? I mean, On Symmetry by Weil. And in every one of those books, we put bookmarks by the people who might have liked it. I mean, and we put books that are not math, but that contain lots of math, and people are not aware of necessarily. And we put bookmarks. In this book, the train tracks here are train tracks. That's something that Thurston gave to geodesics on a hyperbolic surface, because like in a train network, you have geodesics that come together, are very close, and then go away again, like within a train station. And it was one of the favorite books of Maria Mirzakhani, and her computer science husband thought it was very funny that she had a book on train tracks. On mathematical games has Doris Schatzschneider, who corresponded a lot with him, Mechanism of the Heavens by Mary Somerville, which was ostensibly a translation of a French treatise, except it was twice as long because she explained the math so much better. I mean, has an illustration of Katherine Johnson. On weaving has an example by Veronica Irvine, who is a computer scientist who designs new stitches using algorithms for bobbin lace. And then, of course, we're mathematicians. So we would not pass up a reference to Paul Erdős, who would say of a really elegant proof, it was a proof from the book. You know, the book that the Lord has on his night table, and with the right proofs for everything. So we have the book. It has no author. Then all these ideas, so a deep theorem, a nice little proof of an observation by Archimedes that actually is illustrated, the fact that the volume of a cylinder of the same height as its diameter is a sum of the volumes of the inscribed sphere and the inscribed double cone, which has a very nice little proof. I have no time to get into it. It's illustrated by having such buoys, spherical buoys, vats, and baskets on proofs without words. A figure of a theorem by Lisa Piccirillo, in which she proved a very recent result that was conjecture open for decades by Conway on knots. And that same knot is present in the Curio store, another link with Conway. And this has just scratched the surface. There are also little winks. I mean, I've talked about some of the jokes already. I mean, and you've seen some in the bakery, the mandelbrods and so on. This little bird doesn't live in any of these layers I've talked about. Because in the mathmalchemy world, there couldn't be a bird there. There's a glass window. I mean, this store has a roll-down screen that gets locked by Harriet at Link because she doesn't want anything to bore. There is reinforced glass. There cannot be a bird sitting there. But it is sitting there. It's really in the viewer's world. This is a little bird that's saying, ceci n'est pas une vitre. And so these are the mathmalchemists. We call ourselves a curious collaboration. We're curious about everything, but we be also a bit strange, curious. And we made mathmalchemy.org. And we hope you'll come to visit, either on the website or in reality when it comes near you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ingrid, for this wonderful talk. So, are there questions from the audience? This is a great time to ask Ingrid Daubechies and anything that you have been wondering this hour.
They'll all have to explore the website.
Yeah. Oh, there's a question over here. I'll come to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Such an honor to meet you. I'll hope to talk to you later. But what's the future of this mathmalchemy?
Okay, so as an exhibit, it's now touring. It's presently at its 6th venue. It has, I've set the 7th venue in Montreal. The 8th will be at the Navajo Museum of Navajo Nation, which is a very special exhibit for us because while we were working, I wrote to many of the native people in the US. I mean, but in the middle of the pandemic, many of my letters, I'm sure, never reached anybody. But it did reach somebody at the Navajo people, and he wrote back. He was a mathematician, and he offered us some pictures pictures that we could use, and we used in the cavalcade of very mathematical pictures from Navajo culture. And so he's a co-organizer of a summer camp that is done, that tries to bring talented Navajo kids more advanced mathematics. And actually that summer camp has been going on for more than 10 years. And one of the kids who was then in the middle school cohort is now in a PhD program in mathematics. So we want to bring it there, but the Navajo Nation is not wealthy. I mean, most of the institutions, all the institutions so far who've brought it have funded it from their funds or raised the funds. Navajo Nation has many more things that if they have extra money lying around, then they dig wells in the desert for some of their people. They don't invite math exhibitions. So we're raising the money ourselves. And so it's very special, and we feel very strongly about that. And in fact, that's where you can get the cookie cutters. I mean, if you go to, when I showed you, you can, we're going to raise a bigger donation, but right now you can get cookie cutters if for a donation. And here they're illustrated. Okay, so you see how you can use them. And okay, so let me go back to menu from the start. Okay, so while this plays, you'll see my grandson. But so we are doing this in order to bring the exhibit there. So after that, it will go to another institution who's not specified yet. And I had to wait till he was in bed because his helping was too much interfering. So you see here how with the cookie cutter, you use it only one time in two. And then I need to use it again for the first one to get the curl right. Just cut. And that gives you the other cutter. So none of this wasted dough in the middle that you have to re-roll and absorb more flour and the cookies become less nice and so on. All cookie cutters should really be tessellated. And, but so it will continue. We wanted to travel until it starts having wear and tear. I mean, so Dominique is monitoring it. And she originally did not guarantee it for more than 3 years. But it's now 3 years in, and it's still perfect. So it certainly has another 3 years. After ICM, it will stay in the US until the spring of 27. It has an exhibit in Arkansas then. And then we think it might travel to Europe for a few years. And at the moment that it starts showing wear and tear, it will go to a permanent location and no longer travel. I mean, but we designed it so that it is appealing. I mean, we think it probably will end up in a math department somewhere, but it should be appealing to mathematicians. Even if they're used to it, they should still discover unknown things in it. I mean, the documentation talks about a lot, but not about every single thing, actually. So, we've been asked so often how we made this how this was possible for 24 of us to work together. And we unwittingly, I think, observed a few principles that we had a lot of respect for each other. And we didn't parcel out the responsibility. We didn't say, this is only yours. You do it and so when the artists among us, about 1/3 of us are artists and 2/3 are mathematicians, had a question about the math. We didn't say, don't worry your pretty head about it. We mathematicians know. We had to explain the math, and we did. When the mathematicians said, well, that doesn't work for me artistically, the artists would explain. I mean, we talked so much. It was a lot of Zoom. I mean, but I think that really is what made it work. And we hope to inspire, we're writing that up now, and a little story of it. And we hope it will inspire other people to make similar collaborations, because the real fun of it was the alchemy of all our minds. I mean, all the different ideas and things bouncing away, which we experience when we collaborate on mathematics. I had never experienced it on this math and art thing. And it was enormous fun and very enriching, very invigorating. And then you get something that gives joy to others. What more can you? I have here at the front, if people are interested in tamari balls, which I didn't talk about, but those are those big balls that were decorated. I still make them because I have all the extra supplies that I still have and I hate waste. So I'm making more balls. I mean, and at human size, not the ones in Math and Alchemy. And so I can explain how those are made if people want.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Renato.
Thank you very much. It was very nice. I think I missed the last statement about the little bird and the window. So people really don't interact with the objects. They see them.
Yeah. So the exhibit is just to watch. Actually, it has signs on it. Please don't touch. There's a separate table on which we have duplicates of some of it. So, for instance, on the hyperbolic crochet surfaces, they actually show geodesics that they show that it violates the fifth postulate of Euclid with lines that are drawn on it and so on. So we have those, and those people can play with. So we have many of the objects in it that people can play with, and they have copies of the comic book, and they have things that show symmetry with mirrors and so on. So we encourage them to explore there, but the thing itself they cannot touch.
Okay, so some of things are duplicated in some tables around, and the explanations on things are.
All the explanations are online, because many of the museums or the galleries don't have long lists of things on the wall, and so we have QR codes, which people can pull it up on their phone and then read it if they want.
Thank you.
Have you ever considered the idea to write down some short stories about the village and read it in the installation, or something?
Well, I had thought about making a children's book with photographs, which would be fun. In a sense, the comic book is filling part of that niche. I mean, it would be different. I mean, it might still be something, when I have time, that I might want to do. I mean, I think it would be fun. But so we've considered it. There's no project in. But if you'd like to, write it in Spanish. I'll make photographs of it, and we'll translate it as well. That would be wonderful. We actually every single thing in Math and Alchemy is under Creative Commons CC BY license. So it can be copied, it can be duplicated, it can be transformed, and so on. The only thing is that if you remember, you credit the Math and Alchemists. But otherwise, it's completely open for anything.
Well, we have an announcement before we finish, and it's that we have cookies from Math and Alchemy, but they were not baked by Arnold, the cat. So it's even better. They were baked by Ingrid and Clara, so we're very happy to share them with you. So they are here, and when everybody's out, we're going to put them outside so you can all appreciate the cookies. There's an egg version and one version without. There's a soy-free version and a normal version. So, well, we want to thank Ingrid again for everything amazing that you have shown us. Thank you.